First and foremost, I'm going to check my hoses and my wires, making sure my hoses are properly mounted and secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and they're not leaking. Then I'm going to check my wires, making sure they're properly mounted and secured, not ripped, torn, or frayed. There's no exposed wires and no signs of corrosion. And I'm going to check my alternator, making sure my alternator is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. There's no signs of corrosion. It's belt driven. And I'm going to check my water pump. Make sure my water pump's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's not leaking. It's also belt driven. Then I'm going to check my belts, both of them, making sure they're properly mounted and secured, not ripped, torn, or frayed. And there should be no more than 3/4 of an inch of play when pulled. Moving on. I'm going to check all of my hoses and all of my wires just like I did on the passenger side. Next, I'm going to check the coolant reservoir, making sure the coolant reservoir is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's not leaking. If I wanted to fill it, I would fill it. If I wanted to check my levels, I would check them here. And if I wanted to fill it, I would fill it here. And I would never check or fill while the truck is hot. I'm going to check my oil fill and my oil dipstick, making sure they're both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. If I wanted to check my levels, I would check it with my dipstick. And if I wanted to fill my oil, I would fill it here. Next, I'm going to check my air compressor, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. It's also gear driven. And I'm going to check my power steering pump, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not leaking. It's also gear driven. And I'm going to check my power steering reservoir, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not leaking. If I wanted to check my levels, I would check them here. And if I wanted to fill it, I would fill it here. Next, I'm going to check my power steering gearbox, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not properly mounted and secure with nuts and bolts to the frame. It's not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's not leaking. Next, I'm going to check my steering components, starting with my Pitman arm, my drag link, my steering arm, steering knuckle, and tie rods. I'm going to make sure they're all properly mounted and secured with castle nuts and cotter pins. None are cracked, bent, or broken, and they're all properly greased. Then I'm going to check my suspension components, starting with my front and rear leaf spring hangers, making sure they're both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not missing. And I'm going to check my leaf springs, making sure it's properly mounted and secured at the front and the rear. It's not cracked, bent, or broken, and not missing. Next, I'm going to check my U-bolts, make sure they're both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. I'm looking for signs of slippage, okay, which can indicate that I have a loose U-bolt. Next, I'm going to check my shock absorber, making sure it's properly mounted and secured at the top and the bottom. It's not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's not leaking. Next, I'm going to check my brake components, starting with my air hose, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and it's not leaking. Check my brake chamber, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's not leaking. And I'm going to check my push rod and my slack adjuster, making sure they're both properly mounted and secured with pins and cotter pins. It's not cracked, bent, or broken, and they're not missing. And there should be no more than an inch of play when the brakes are disengaged. Next, I'm going to check my brake drum, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, smooth on the inside of 3 of them. And I'm going to check my brake shoe, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And there should be no less than 1/4 inch of material. I'm going to check my inner hub seal, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. And I'm going to check my outer hub seal, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. If I wanted to check the levels, I would check the levels here by sticking my finger in up to the first knuckle. And if I wanted to fill it, I would also fill it here. Next, I'm going to check my butt rim, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and there are no illegal welds. And I'm going to check my lug nuts, making sure that they're all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and none are missing. I'm looking for rust trails or shiny threads, which can indicate that I have a loose lug nut. And I'm going to check my valve stem and cap, making sure they're both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking, and the cap is in place, preventing debris from getting in. If I wanted to check my air levels, I would check it with an air gauge, and if I wanted to fill air into the tire, I would fill it with an air chuck. And I can find my hot and cold PSI specifications on the outside wall of the tire. And I'm going to check my tire, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. I'm looking for smooth and evenly worn treads. This can only be a virgin tire with no less than 4/30 seconds of tread depth. There, check my mirror, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's not missing. Then I'm going to check my door. My door latch opens, closes properly. I'm going to check door sag. If it has door sag, it could be an indication that I have a broken or missing hinge. Then I'm going to check the hinges, making sure the hinges are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and they're not missing. Next, I'm going to check my inner and my outer door seals, making sure they're properly mounted and secured, not ripped, torn, or frayed, and not leaking. Then I'm going to check my steps, making sure they're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and can support my weight as the driver. Moving on, I'm going to check my fuel tank, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. And I'm going to check the fuel tank cap, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. Then I'm going to check my fuel tank straps, one here and one here, and make sure they're properly mounted and secured, not properly mounted and secured with nuts and bolts to the frame. It's not cracked, bent, or broken, and none are missing. Then I'm going to check the clearance between the truck and trailer, making sure that there's enough clearance to make safe turns. From there, I'm going to check my air hoses. I'm going to check my emergency and my service lines, make sure they're properly mounted and secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and they're not leaking. And I'm going to check my glad hands, making sure they're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. And I'm going to check the grommets, making sure the grommets are properly mounted and secured, not ripped, torn, or frayed, and not missing. From there, I'm going to check my drive shaft, making sure my drive shaft is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's free from debris wrapped around it. Then I'm going to check my U-joints, making sure they're properly mounted and secured with nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, or broken, and properly greased. Then I'm going to check my exhaust, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. I'm looking for signs of excessive soot and rust, which can indicate that I have an exhaust leak. From there, I'm going to check my catwalk and my steps, making sure my catwalk is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's free from debris and hoses and wires dragging on it. From there, I'm going to check the steps, make sure they're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and can support my weight as a driver. Okay. From there, we're going to do the frame, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's free from illegal welds and holes. From there, I'm going to check the cross members, making sure they're all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing. Moving on, I'm going to check my suspension components, starting with my control arm hanger. Control arm hanger is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing. I'm going to check my control arm, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not missing. From there, I'm going to check my U-bolts, making sure they're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not missing. And I'm looking for signs of slippage. Next, I'm going to check my shock absorber, making sure it's properly mounted and secured at the top and the bottom. It's not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. Moving on, I'm going to check the airbag, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and it's not leaking. From there, I'm going to check the brake components, starting with the air hose. Air hose is properly mounted and secured. Actually, you can do it here. Sorry. I'm going to check my brake components, starting with my air hose, my brake chamber, the push rod, and my slack adjusters, the brake drums, and the brake shoes. I'm going to check them just like I checked them on the steers. From there, I'm going to check my inner axle seal, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. Then check my outer axle seal, Making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. If I needed to have this serviced, I'd have to bring it to a certified mechanic. Okay? Moving on, I'm going to check my bud rim, my lug nuts, my valve stemming cap, and my tires, just like I did on the steers, with the exception that these tires can only be a recap, or well, it can be a recap with no less than 230 seconds of tread depth. Okay. From there, we're going to check the bud spacing, making sure there's no space between the buds and it's free and clear of debris. Okay. Then I'm going to check my mud flap hanger and mud flap, making sure my mud flap hanger is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not missing. And my mud flap is properly mounted and secured, not ripped, torn, or frayed, and not missing. Then I'm going to check the clearance between the mud flap and the tire, mud flap and the ground, mud flap and the landing gear. Moving on, I'm going to check the coupling system, starting with my L bracket. L bracket's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not missing. Then I'm going to check my fifth wheel, my sliding fifth wheel platform, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing. I know this is a sliding fifth wheel platform because it has an air hose and it has locking pins. I'm going to make sure the air hose is properly mounted and secured, no abrasions, moisture cuts, it's not leaking. Then I'm going to check the locking pins, making sure that the locking pins are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and in the lock position, safe for travel. From there, I'm going to check my locking release handle, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, in the lock position, safe for travel. From there, I'm going to check my skid plate. Now, guys, this is what everybody pile in. I want y'all to look. You see right here? That right there? That's a nut and bolt. Some of them have pins and powder pins. It's up to you guys to tell the difference. Okay, but this particular one has a nut and bolt. So when you explain the skid plate, make sure you're always looking for that nut and bolt or that pin and powder pin. Okay? Skid plate's properly mounted and secured with nuts and bolts. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. It's properly greased. If they have a pin and powder pin, it will be properly mounted and secured with pin and powder pin. Okay? Not cracked, bent, or broken. Skid plate's properly greased. Moving on, we're going to check the locking jaws. Locking jaws are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing, and properly fastened around the shank of your kingpin. From there, we're going to check the kingpin. The kingpin's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, properly welded to the apron of the trailer. From there, we're going to check the apron. Make sure the apron's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's free from illegal holes, and it can support the weight of the load. From there, we move on to our header board and our sidewall. Our header boards are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing. There's no holes or bulges, and can properly secure a load. There should be no more than 3 rivets missing per panel. Now I'm going to check my upper and my lower frame, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing, and there should be no more than 1 rivet missing on the entire frame. From there, we're going to check our I-beams and our floorboards. I-beams and our floorboards. So our I-beams are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing, and can properly support the weight of a load, and there should be not 1 missing on the whole trailer. So if one's missing on the trailer, you gotta put it on the stairs. And I'm gonna check my floorboards, make sure they're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's free from illegal holes and can properly support the weight of the load. Moving on, we're gonna check our landing gear, making sure our landing gear is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's free from broken welds or not missing any nuts and bolts. Then I'm gonna check the landing gear legs, making sure they're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and they're in the up position, safe for travel. Then I'm going to check the landing gear feet, making sure it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing, and it's free from debris. Okay. Moving on. I'm going to check my sliding tandems. Sliding tandems, now when you say sliding tandems, that you're accounting for the whole thing as a unit. So I'm gonna check my sliding tandems, making sure the properly mounted, secured, not cracked, not broken, and not missing. I know these are sliding tandems because it's got a locking release lever and it's got locking pins. Locking release levers, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, not broken, not position, safe and travel. I'm gonna check the locking pins, properly mounted and secured. It's right there. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, not broken. Also in the lock position, safe and travel. Moving on, I'm going to check the suspension. So, I want to say these are torque arm hangers. Yeah, torque arms. I'm going to check the torque arm hangers. Make sure they're properly mounted, secured, not cracked, not broken, not missing. I'm going to check the torque arms. Make sure they're properly mounted, secured, not cracked, not broken, not missing. From there, I'm going to check my gotta see my airbags. Yeah, airbags. I'm going to check my shock absorber, and my airbags, just like I did on my drives. From there, I'm going to check brakes. I'm going to check the From there, I'm going to check my brake hose, my brake chamber, my push rod, and my slack adjusters, my brake drums, and my brake shoes. I'm going to check those just like I did in my drives. From there, I'm going to check the inner and the outer hub seal, just like I did on my steers. From there, I'm going to check my bud rim, my lug nuts, valve stem and cap, tires, bud spacing, mud flap hanger and mud flap. I'm going to check those just like I did on my drives. Moving on. I'm going to check the door. Now, it's going to be different on the test trailers. Test trailers all have roll doors. Okay? So we're just going to do it like it's a roll door. So I'm going to check the door, making sure it's properly mounted, secured, not cracked, or broken, not missing, properly secure or low. And I'm going to check the door hinges, which we'll use these for now, but on the other one, they're kind of integrated into the door, into the seats of the door. So I'm going to check the door hinges, making sure they're properly mounted, secured, not cracked, or broken, and they're not missing any rivets. Then I'm going to check the door cables, making sure the door cables are properly mounted, secured, not ripped, torn, or frayed, not missing. Then I'm going to check the door latch, making sure the door latch is properly mounted, secure, not cracked, or broken, in the lock position, safe for travel. From there, I'm going to check my DOT bumper. Make sure my DOT bumper is properly mounted, secure with nuts and bolts. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. It's free from broken welds and excessive damage. And then from there,
So we're going to have to open the handles on the door?
what handles?
Yeah.
No, because the test trailers don't have those. From there, I'm going to check the passenger side, just like I did the driver's side.